So, moving on to our sixth Prime Minister, that was John Stuart the third Earl of Bute. Now, the Earl of Bute, like Devonshire before him, had a pretty short term, just 11 months, from May 1762 to April 1763, and he succeeded the second term of the Duke of Newcastle. One significant fact about the Earl of Bute is that he was the first Scottish Prime Minister, or Prime Minister born in Scotland since the Act of Union in 1707. And although his term of office was quite short, there were a few notable things happened. So this is his biography from 10 Downing Street. He was born in 1713 at Parliament Square in Edinburgh, and when he entered office he would have been, doing a bit of maths here, I guess that's 49 years old. And this is a quotation for him. During a debate on the cider tax, a noble duke knows the difficulty to choose proper taxes. Lord Bute is said to have been tall, slim, and very handsome. He had spent just 3 years in Parliament before his time as Prime Minister, and this was more than 2 decades earlier. In those 20 years he had been befriended and become tutor to the young Prince George. Upon George's accession as King George III, the Earl of Bute was made Secretary of State, and for this reason he is sometimes known as the last royal favourite, which is a term in the British monarchy for noblemen who are very close to a monarch. Sometimes there's even insinuations of a homosexual relationship, although of course it's very hard to prove that. It then goes on to say, despite bringing peace and concluding the 7 Years' War, he proved deeply unpopular in England for reasons including his nationality. Many in England were still distrustful of Scots after the Jacobite Rising of 1745 to 1746, bearing in mind that Rising had went down as far south as Derby, so it was there was still some xenophobia between the two kingdoms. This led to written, verbal and physical attacks being made upon him, and he resigned in 1763. Only spending 11 months in office, he nevertheless ended both the predominance of the Whigs and the 7 Years' War. So I think it's fair to say that he had quite an influential time in office, given that it was only 11 months. One important act during his premiership was the cider tax of 1763, which was imposition of a 4 shillings per hogshead on cider to raise revenue to pay for the 7 Years' War. Lord Bute had quite an unfortunate end. According to the 10 Downing Street website, he died in 1792 after falling 28 feet down some cliffs near his home. He was buried appropriately on the Isle of Bute in Scotland, and when he died he was 78 years old. Although I should say the Wikipedia page suggests that he died at Grosvenor Square in Westminster, so there's some discrepancy there. As a peer, and quite a powerful peer at that, he held the manor of Luton Hoo in Bedfordshire, and that's one of the best known stately homes in the south of England. There's a few portraits of the Earl of Bute's family, and certainly he comes across as quite a wealthy individual. Can't see any references to personal fortune, but certainly based on the sort of dress and so on, his family portraits, he certainly looks like, befitting his title as an Earl, a very well off figure. In fact, the Wikipedia portrait makes him look almost like a monarch, so he certainly comes across as a privileged figure. He was also a close relative of the Clan Campbell, which is one of Scotland's most notable clans. So that is our sixth Prime Minister, the Earl of Bute. One more factor I forgot to mention, this is important. He was the first Prime Minister who was not a Whig. He was a Tory. This is a slightly different sort of Tory from today's Conservatives, the Tories. The original Tories were actually sort of Irish rebels, for want of a better term, so Toryism at that time is not exactly the same as the Toryism that we see today, although they are related. So he is also Britain's first Tory Prime Minister. John Stuart, the third Earl of Bute.